We think, as always, it's a little rocky getting off to start here on our live show.
Okay. So that was very special. Facebook was counting down, said it still had like 12 seconds, and then boom, live.
Bam.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I guess we're live.
We're live. It's Thursday, it's 3 o'clock.
Yes.
This is the Live at Epiphan show. I'm George.
I'm also
He's George. Everybody's George.
Today.
Yep. And this is the show. We talk about live streaming, we talk about video technology, and we talk about industry stuff around video. So that's kind of what we're doing today, right?
Yeah. And we're kind of a little disorganized because Cameron was supposed to be on the show, and he's unfortunately out sick, so you got roped in last minute. I don't even have notes printed out. We don't have anything.
We're pros, man. We don't need notes.
It's all chaos.
Not anymore.
It's all chaos. But the topic of today's show, I think, is really interesting. Through now 101 shows, since this is episode 101, this is maybe not the most technical of shows, but I think it's actually super interesting. So we're going to be featuring our interview, which we did actually a few days ago, pre-recorded.
Yeah, this is kind of a cheat show in a way because we're actually going to play back an interview that we recorded on Monday.
Yeah, unfortunately schedules couldn't line up to have our guest live.
Yeah.
So
we're going to do fake live.
Pre-recorded the interview.
But we'll be watching along with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you haven't even watched it yet.
I did listen to some of it while I was working a few minutes ago, but I didn't get to the end of it. So there's going to be some surprises for me and you.
Yeah.
But it also means throw some comments in the chat. Let us know you're here. Say hello. George here is dutifully monitoring chat. And then if you have any questions for us, we'll answer it. We'll also jump in after the interview and try to address any questions that come up during the show. So keep those interactions coming.
So I am looking at chat. Hello to Tim. Hello to Faithful Mess. See you in there. Craig was chatting earlier. He was making jokes about being a guest on the show. Is facial hair a requirement? It seems like it's becoming that way.
Yeah, definitely a requirement.
You know, you jumped on the bandwagon, so.
Yeah, it just came in, actually. Puberty hit me late.
Mike was saying the show must go on. Joseph, Joseph was saying live to tape, as the TV guys call it. Well, funny enough, our guest is a TV guy.
Yeah, we're going to be talking lots of TV. So
coming from that world, so that's really interesting. I was also just trying to pull up my notes here because we did obviously have news topics, a few of them anyways. I'm
excited to hear about them.
Well, the first one, partially I think kind of ties in well with today's subject matter, is that we are a month and a bit away from NAB in Las Vegas, which Epiphan, of course, will be there. We have a booth at South Upper Hall, 11203. I'm never going to remember that. It's too many numbers. How do they...
There's a lot of booths.
I know, it is.
They need that many numbers. They cannot go shorter.
Yeah.
Booth number 9. We're not
exactly.
That'd be great, though. What booth are you? 4.
But we're gearing up for that show. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah.
You don't get to go this time. You were there last year.
I was there the last couple of years, so I'm going to take the year off.
Take the year off. Wow.
Yeah, take the whole year off.
I don't get that much
See you later, everybody.
But, of course, those who joined us last week know that we did announce our winner, who's going to be joining us at that show.
Yeah, we're going to have Zoe.
Yeah.
Don't know her last name. Going to be there.
Working on it. Yeah, we're working on all the logistics for that. There's a lot to figure out. It's going to be good. And, we're looking forward to seeing her reports from the show and what she learns. But it ties in well because we're talking to someone coming from traditional broadcast, and NAB is still mostly about that, and
big
historically all about that, but it's shifting a lot, which is why we go. So that's going to be a really fascinating thing. Yes. I think this will be our 3rd year exhibiting at NAB, and for me, this will be my 3rd time there, and each time it has moved a little, especially in that South Upper Hall.
You mean the subject of the show has moved? It's gone from hardcore broadcast show to broadcast and OTT, and now content creators, streamers, broadcast all mixed together in this melting pot.
Well, especially in that South Upper Hall, right? You're getting all this cloud tech, all this live streaming and encoding tech. You know, if you remember that first year we were there and we were launching the Webcaster X2.
Yes.
And I think every single old guy from the traditional broadcast media from every single major U.S. network walked up and said, "The boss says I got a live stream. What am I doing?"
Yeah.
You know, and
where's the satellite truck? Where do I park it?
And then last year they kind of already had an idea. Yeah. So now I'm interested in what that progression is going to be this year. So we'll see. So we're excited for that. But also this week in news we saw, some live streaming stuff that was interesting. We mentioned last week, actually, the numbers that Samsung got for their launch event, for their Unpacked event. It was like ridiculous numbers.
That was a lot of zeros, yeah.
But of course, follow up to that, Huawei then launched a folding phone as well. Not nearly as much fanfare or as many people watching the live stream for it, but that was at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. A bunch of stuff came out there as well. So now there seems to be this folding tablet phone revolution thing coming. They're talking.
I think we're going to look back
talking crap about each other.
What do you think about it? Did you give a verdict on this thing?
They're too thick. They're just way too thick.
You
can't put it in a pocket.
They look clunky, don't they?
It's way too bulky for a pocket.
Don't you also worry it's not going to really hold up?
I'm waiting for the slide out, like science fiction, you know.
Yeah,
that's what I.
Oh, it'll be like a knife, you know, this knife.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly. That sort of thing. So that's interesting, and we'll see how that changes things, because I think the one advantage, especially with the Samsung that has like 4 cameras on the back, and this bigger screen, it might start to become a little more feasible to shoot and live stream from those types of phones, especially if they have 5G eventually, to kind of do a little more that way.
Sorry, I don't understand. Because you're having better...
Well, the cameras are getting better.
The cameras are getting better, but they're going to get better regardless of the foldability of it, right?
Yes, but they're kind of doing it all together. But the bigger screen gives you a bigger confidence monitor. That's easier to hold, easier to stabilize.
Yeah.
That's the interesting.
That's true.
We'll see. We'll see. I think most immediately, though, something I stumbled across this morning that I found really interesting was NVIDIA, the graphics card manufacturer, announced they had a partnership with OBS, Open Broadcast Software, which most people know if they're doing computer-based streaming, making mistakes, as you and I have, using a laptop and OBS to do this show from remote locations. And actually, this might have helped us in some ways.
So what are they doing?
So they're announcing that the newest version of OBS, version 23, which is supposed to be launching basically now, has new enhancements to leverage the NVIDIA hardware codec.
So you won't need as beefy machine.
Right. So if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you'll be able to leverage it better for your encoding using OBS. And they're really aiming it towards, hey gamers, you no longer need the 2 PC setup, one for gaming and one for streaming. They're saying that with the higher end NVIDIA graphics cards, you can successfully, without error, use one system to do both, which was always high risk.
That's huge.
So they're claiming that this enhancement to the NVIDIA codec leveraging their hardware means that you don't need the 2 PC setup anymore. So they are definitely trying to pitch their like $1,000 graphics card as part of that. But it's interesting, and they had some numbers to try and back up how much they're improving it without dropping frames and all this. So it's good to see that the hardware guys are now starting to work closer with some of these pieces to make sure that things run smoother. It's just an indication of how important live streaming is becoming, I think, for a wide mix.
A much better integration.
Yeah, so that's interesting. There's a bunch of articles out there. If you search NVIDIA and OBS, you'll find the articles on it. It's pretty interesting. The other piece that I found, and maybe this is a taboo subject, but this week was interesting in live streaming in both the US and in Canada for political scandals, and how many people watched the 2 countries, 2 different political scandals.
Well, and it ties right into our show today, which is about broadcast news.
That was the other reason I wanted to bring it up. I don't want to have a debate about the politics of either situation, but...
Oh, come on. The people would love it.
I do, but not on this show.
Yeah, and I don't either, actually.
But it is interesting to see how many people watched these 2 different events live in the various venues.
Well, they're the last 2 frontiers of relevant live content, which is sports and super news.
Exactly, breaking news. And it's something that we discussed quite a bit with our guest in our interview, so we're going to get to that in a second. But I guess one of the things I'm just going to throw this out there just as a random thing to see what people in chat want to maybe touch on. But when we're talking about these instances, especially when it involves politics, is the civil discourse that comes along with it, is it actually civil? Is it good? Is it bad? That's the risk of live streaming this stuff. You never know what people are going to say in chat or whatever.
Yeah, and can you control it? You have to monitor it, you have to shut it down.
I'm just throwing that out there as a thought piece for people to consider. But getting the information as a viewer, fast, on the fly, live during these sessions,
it's amazing.
Has been very interesting.
For sure. Not
filtered by traditional media, which makes it even more interesting to digest for your own opinions. So, So there's a bunch of people in chat here, of course. Please keep the comments going. Faithful messages saying congratulations to Zoe. Ron was film at 11. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Again, these are things that come up quite a bit in our upcoming interview here in a second. Let's see. Tim was just saying, is there a pricing guide anywhere for live webcasting or production? What is the range of return on investment, and what is the best markets to be in?
Good question.
Very good question, and it's actually honestly a massive question, Tim, because what's your subject? Is it actually something you can monetize easy? Are there people
You might be able to check out the revenue models put out by Facebook, like in terms of how their monetization works for live streaming. And the baseline is actually fairly high to even monetize a live stream on Facebook. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And YouTube especially now.
You have to have a significant number of viewers. Like you can't go with 200 live viewers and monetize that. They won't allow that.
Exactly.
Something like 5,000 viewers or something like that?
YouTube, you have to have like 4,000 subs or 10,000 watch hours a year.
Oh, so it's based on your channel.
To monetize your channel now.
But you can monetize a live stream at the same within that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of rules to that.
Yeah.
It's why so many people have gone to options like Twitch, but then are you actually getting any viewers? Are you using content that's going to play well on that platform? And at the end of the day, I actually had someone jump on our live chat to talk to our support team a few days ago, and they just started, they saw our blog post.
We have a ton of blog posts about monetizing live streaming.
How to make money live streaming. They said, well, how do I do it? Well, starts by, are you interesting?
Be fascinating.
Are people going to watch, and is your content good?
Yeah.
But the number one rule is just do it. You can't build an audience unless you're just doing it, being consistent, and just getting it out there.
Yeah.
It starts with that, and hopefully it builds. That's like cross your fingers and hope for it. So articles, Tim, I mean, we have a bunch of blog posts about it, but I don't know if it's going to give you that magic bullet, but hopefully it gives you some ideas and some inspiration for things to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few people just saying hi there in chat, including Cameron, sick at home, I see.
Poor Cameron. Get well, Cameron.
So
I'll keep your seat warm.
Yeah. So with all that, I think maybe we're in a good position to...
you want to throw out the video?
Yeah.
I can throw out my Skype, all that stuff, so I don't accidentally...
But we're going to jump into our interview with Elton and kind of go through that a little bit. So hopefully you guys enjoy this interview. We'll keep an eye on chat here, and when we come back after the interview, we will address any questions you guys have.
And we'll be attending chat like crazy.
Try and break it down. Here we'll break it down afterwards.
All right.
Maybe.
Sounds good. We might even interrupt it halfway through. Who knows?
We might. If someone pops something into chat that's super relevant and super interesting about it, we'll interrupt it to address it. So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lisa, let's pull up this video.
Yeah.
Elton, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you having you on the show today.
Pleasure.
And can you tell us, what is your title and a brief description of what you do?
So my title is National Managing Editor for Online Video. If you're seeing a breaking news video, that is not something that is original content, but something that's happening in the moment on globalnews.ca, on any of our affiliated social media platforms, on YouTube, wherever, that's me or my team that's taking care of that. So it really covers a huge spectrum of video, all the way from the latest international breaking news stories to filling in the gaps in our local newsroom when there's, a local story that has a video element, and everything in between.
That makes you a busy guy, is what that is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there aren't many slow days in what I do, which I guess is, always a mixed blessing in the news business. We want to live in interesting times, as the old saying goes. But yeah, I would say very rarely do we get a slow week, but that's part of what attracts you to the job.
So I guess one of the big questions that we're trying to explore is what really differentiates sort of that online broadcast, which is still very new, compared to the traditional news coverage? Traditional
news coverage, especially in the TV domain, has a lot of rules baked into it. It's it's very formatted and done a certain way. And there's certain expectations when you tune into a 6:30 news broadcast. There are certain expectations about the kind of thing you're going to be seeing, the kind of content you're going to be delivered, and how stories are going to be presented. In the digital space, you have a lot more freedom, I would say, and a lot more audience expectation of wanting to get to the story without, there being kind of a middleman or a barrier. Our slogan at Global is that we need to go to the viewer in 2019. The news business for so long got lucky in that, viewers kind of had to come find the news. When you were in the 20s, 30s, 40s, if you want to know what was happening, you had to buy a newspaper or you had to listen to the radio. You had to go to the news providers. Now we need to go wherever the news reader is. Some people want to read it on their phones in the moment. Some people still want to watch the 5:30, 6:30 newscast. Some people want to listen on their radios. Some people want to go on Facebook, on social media and get news. We need to compete in every single market, which unfortunately increases the workload, but it also increases the creativity. So in a breaking news sense, we don't need a fully produced newscast with an anchor and throws and graphics. We can take you to the scene of a developing story, something as mundane as a bear in a community, all the way up to the latest breaking news, and provide kind of in-the-moment coverage that brings someone on that story to the moment without any kind of interference or any kind of barrier to understanding what's going on. You are there in the moment as the story is unfolding. It's scary, but it's also incredible, the amount of information we can provide.
There is that pileup crash just near Barrie on the 400, and there's that OPP officer who was basically using Periscope to do a live stream from the scene. And he's bringing that content before anyone from the media can get there. And obviously, no one should risk getting there either.
Right.
So that's kind of the interesting thing I find about the digital space, is that we can get this stuff from a lot of different directions and still get that content in the now, I guess.
And you're literally taking out that middleman, right?
Yeah.
Like where that officer is now basically the on-scene reporter. And kind of one of the things that George and I were talking about was how do you actually secure that content? Because that's his public Periscope account. Is that just free domain and Global News can bring that in and now it's live on the scene?
In that case, we would consider that to be public domain, and we would take that and put it on our site. In the past, the OPP has had no problem with that, especially when the point of the Periscope is to communicate a public service, such as a major highway is shut down due to multiple collisions. They're not going to go to copyright court and claim that. They want that word to get out. It's very savvy by them to get that out first, because then every news organization that's still probably scrambling resources and calling people in the area will use that as their first point of contact, meaning you get to control what viewers see first.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's really no downside to it, and it's great to see more and more police agencies embracing that kind of approach.
Yeah.
When would you say the Global News actually recognized the need to shift focus to this online news outlet?
I started at Global in 2013 on their online breaking news desk, and I would say the shift had already begun at the point that I had arrived. But in terms of that reorganization, so I'd say it's probably about 6 or 7 years now as a company, if not even earlier than that, kind of with ever increasing energy and momentum as we read the way the news industry is going, the media industry at large is going. I would say the real investment in the digital side occurred during the Chorus sale a couple of years ago when Global News was purchased by Chorus, and essentially was given a mandate to try and turn us into a digital-first newsroom, which in large part I think we have succeeded. It's still very tough. I mean, we're a legacy TV brand first and foremost, with a dedicated audience that is still our bread and butter. So it hasn't been a 180 shift. We've kind of had to make a culture shift and serve, as I was saying before, kind of a bunch of audiences at once. But that's the space we compete in these days. So I'd say, maybe the better part of a decade now, I think the company has been slowly turning towards the digital side to become, at this point, the #2 digital news brand in Canada.
I guess, as you were kind of mentioning, and this touches on that, has moving to this online mandate gone as expected, and are things kind of meeting that expectation, exceeding that expectation?
I would say in terms of the expectations and our targets, we exceeded them as far as I'm aware. Has it gone smoothly? Yes, I think as much as it can. Obviously, as I was speaking to before, it's a huge organization. It's a cross-country organization with multiple newsrooms in cities across Canada that now has a strong radio element because of Chorus Entertainment, our parent company, and a ton of different audiences to serve before we even start talking about a digital push. So it's definitely been a slower process over years, but I think that's the way it has to be. And overall, I think the company is really committed to a digital-first strategy, and the investment and the time and the care is going into that, and I think it's paying off.
So when it comes to actually serving up this content, does targeted marketing on the Global News platform actually change what viewers are seeing online?
Yeah, we we do marketing for videos in a very similar way to most companies. In terms of does it change what they see? We try to tailor the whole experience to be specific to the audience member that comes onto our website, however they come onto it. That speaks to what I was saying before about our strategy of, we kind of need to deliver the best content to the audience. So the globalnews.ca homepage actually will present a different mix of stories depending on what region you're logging into, or coming from, rather, what region you set as your homepage, depending on what content you want to view. It presents what we call the story stream on the main page, which is a compilation kind of built just for you or what we think you're going to be interested in. And then at the top is kind of our curated content, which is the editorial staff at Global presents these stories. We think these are the big breaking news stories of the day. And then in terms of the video content, it's all about marrying it to our stories and to social media. If you have great video on the web just on its own with no promotion, with no strong, text element, it's not going to perform nearly as well. In fact, it probably won't perform to its maximum potential. So for us, it's really about getting everything right. I work in the video section, but we have our best days when everything else is on 10 and all the teams are working together and we're rolling out content that has a strong article written by an investigative reporter paired with a social media strategy, paired with original content. If we can do that, it's a good day.
How do you feel that this shift to this more digital first strategy, how do you think that's impacted the typical news consumer? Do you think that this is a very positive shift? And maybe that's a biased opinion considering your position, but
For sure. No, I understand. And I mean, it's a relevant question these days when we talk about the spread of misinformation on social media and how that influences, government and public policy and perception and that sort of thing. Has it been positive? In a lot of ways, I think it has. In terms of it brings us closer to parts of the world and to different events that we normally would think of as an abstract. That if we had to hear it described, it sounds very abstract, and you get to actually be there now. And also, you get the news environment is what you want it to be way more than it's ever been before. I'm speaking before to the kind of old school news environment, which was very channeled and you had a couple outlets. You could buy your local paper. You could listen to a couple radio stations. You could watch a couple network news broadcasts. That's what your options were in 1970. Nowadays, you can read specific content about a country or about a conflict or about a person. You can read entertainment. You can read science. You can filter your news to be exactly what you want. The challenge is educating people to take those steps and to filter out, what they want, what they need, what's frivolous and what isn't. It's a line that, frankly, nobody walks perfectly. I don't think anybody, I often say people are very quick to judge news organizations, media companies in general, for the kind of content they put on. But I think if you searched anybody's, social media browsing, you would find a couple outliers of, why'd you click on that? Oh, I don't know. It was cute. It was funny. It was eye-grabbing. We all like to waste time, right? It's universal. And I think it's just finding that balance and the education side of things to let people know that, something we try to do at Global a lot is we'll get comments from people saying, I don't like this entertainment story. I don't like this Justin Bieber story or whatever the case is. Why are you posting this? And what they don't realize is that because they've commented on that on Facebook, Facebook is now going to try and show them more of those kind of stories. So it's a perpetuating cycle. It's an education thing. It's like the media does nothing but cover Justin Bieber. Or you're just kind of getting the feedback the internet thinks you want. And if you were a little more savvy, you could filter those stories out and focus on the content you like. So I think it's educational. I think it's been really good for increasing the choice of news and the variety and the specificity of news. We just need to educate people on that process and that environment so they're getting exactly what they want.
Yeah, a lot of people just simply don't understand the way social media and the internet as a whole functions in the background. They only see it on the surface, and yeah, it's very different in the background.
Well, we've always had those silos, right? So we've had those silos in our workplaces and our personal lives, and the more you kind of fall into that echo chamber, depending on what kind of content you're ingesting consistently, that'll drive the online content that you're seeing. But of course, if you expand that and you look at other things and maybe clear your cookies every once in a while, then you'll actually get that kind of wider experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Now, how has the cord cutting trend affected traditional news outlets and maybe broadened or brought more viewers to that online experience?
There's definitely been a shift there. The traditional TV format, is in a period of reinvention. Certainly at our company, I think across the map, the way business has been done is kind of shifting. At Global, we have something called the Multi-Market Content Center, which is essentially an effort to centralize a lot of our local newscasts under one building so that we avoid a lot of the duplication of effort, right? So that you don't tune into a story in Lethbridge about the Canada Post strike, and then we do a story in Red Deer about the Canada Post strike, and then we do one in Calgary, and then we do one, and it's a different reporter doing the same story 4 or 5 times. So part of that has been just being smarter about that sort of thing, and also producing content that can compete in a couple different markets. That reporter who's going to file a story for the 5:30 news can also do a quick web hit or feedback a really good interview or a really good piece of scene video or set up a Facebook Live, do a web component as well. So, we get to serve those multiple audiences without adding too much to their plate. It's just about finding that balance. And I think, that's a struggle for my job and assignment editors across the country, is teaching people who, again, are really set in that TV news formula and that TV news system, that if they think outside the box just a little bit, there's always opportunities on the digital side to be seen, to grow your brand, to grow the company's brand, to do your job. There's really no downside.
Part of that segues into, what about paying for news online? There's a lot of, especially this is popular within the newspaper companies, where they often will have a paywall in front of their articles. You see it less with, visual-based mediums, certainly, but certainly with traditional papers, they've all paywalled their sites for the articles they believe people are going to pay for, the main headlines. Is that something that you think is going to sort of increase, or is that something that is sort of...
It's controversial. I mean, look, I think if you have a brand like the Washington Post or the New York Times, and you throw up a paywall, you have the prestige to be able to get away with it. I think a lot of news agencies, when they throw up the paywall, it tends to really sour the audience. For better or worse, the news consuming audience in 2019 doesn't think news is something they should have to shell out for. It's just something that exists. And if I don't get it from you, I'll get it from someone else. And the second, we all encounter it. The second we hit a paywall on a site, I'm hitting back. I'm going to another site.
Yeah. Windows closed.
And it's nothing personal against that news provider. I mean, all the best. If I lived in Miami or whatever the case may be, maybe I would subscribe. But in this specific case, you lost a viewer because you put up that barrier.
Right.
I'm going to somewhere else, and someone else is getting that click, and maybe that second story, and maybe that follow, and maybe. We want it to be that if you are the kind of person who wants to get a notification on your phone that there's a story, you get it. If you want a daily email running down a list of what we consider to be the top stories of the day, you get that. If you want to still watch the news at 5:30, you get that. If you know what I mean? We need to go to you and make it easy for you to get the news in the way that you want it. I think that's the approach most companies need to take. For most news organizations, I think we need to be more accessible, not less.
Right.
Well, and just a follow-up to that question, has Global and other online news agencies had the same negative impact that newspapers would have had, where they're just not getting the kind of revenue from those paid ads, versus an online platform where you still have an opportunity to bring in ad revenue? You still have someone on your site where you can have banners and pre-roll ads as well.
Yeah, I mean, we face all those pressures. Like the constant problem of, digital marketing is that it's just such a smaller sum game than TV. Yeah. And especially if you've worked in, broadcast marketing for most of your career, the numbers probably look a little crazy, because even nowadays on TV, those ad margins, to sell X amount of time in a TV broadcast is a very tangible amount of money versus the metrics game of running a pre-roll ad or a mid-roll or something like that. It could seem like a lot more like penny stocks kind of thing, right?
Right.
But I mean, I can tell you that as far as I'm concerned and the organization is concerned, I think that's the way we're going. It's about managing audience experience. I think everyone reasonably will put up with a little bit of inconvenience and a little bit of advertising. People aren't, by and large, unreasonable. Some people never want to see an ad in their life, and that's fine. Just some people never want to pay to get on the bus. It's just the way it is. Some people are like that, and that's fine. But most people will put up, if you come to a website and you've clicked on something and it's a crazy video and you want to watch this, and there's a 15-second ad with an option to skip after 5, you're probably going to go, yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, conversely, if there's a 90-second ad for a 20-second blurry cell phone video, you go, what the hell, and you're never clicking on that website again, right?
Exactly.
It's just people are reasonable. You just need to make it, make it within the realms of, what people will put up with in a digital space. And then hopefully the audience metrics make up for the fact that that's just not as monetizable. That 90-second ad will make more money per click, but I just don't think most people want to do that in a digital space. And I think they're going to go to the places that make it easier to access that content, and then they're going to be able to get those clicks and that attention and that continuing viewer base.
Yeah, well, I think a little bit of a segue from that, especially the ad being longer than the content itself sometimes, definitely dissuades the viewer. But to that degree, I mean, a lot of online stuff is becoming very clickbait, for better or worse, mostly worse, I would say. But it's a thing. And especially even with video, you get these 15-second clips that someone shot on their cell phone, and then it's put out there, goes viral, whatever. Is that something that the traditional news companies can thrive in that? And obviously that's a big part of your job, is to live within that realm. And how do you feel about that sort of citizen journalism that can so easily go viral with these tiny little clips?
Right. I mean, like as you said, that's a huge part of what I do, and especially in a breaking news situation. Often the first video we get is cell phone video that people have posted online of whatever the event is, positive or negative, and that's kind of what we're going through. I think in some ways it's really great. I mean, again, the stories are being told in a personal way that I don't think they ever would be in the past. And whether that's, whether the audience wants to see it in that kind of raw sense, I think it's up to the news provider to present that in a way that, if you're going to click on something that is disturbing or visceral or in the moment or emotional even, it doesn't have to be visually disturbing. It can be a terrible story told, by the time you get to the end, you go, oh God, that's awful. As long as we're being clear about that, as long as no one feels exploited by the time they finish watching the video, you need to be clear about, your content delivery. To your point about clickbait, it's a tough line that we all walk, because unfortunately, the audience tends to reward bad behavior when it comes to headlines and social media. The audience tends to reward, big over the top, at least in the moment. What we argue and what we hope is that over the long term, the trusted brands that don't oversell, are the ones that stick around and that build an audience and that people will trust, in a tense breaking news moment. But, we need to kind of walk a fine line there. And I think at Global, it's all about what is the content. If it's an entertainment story about, for instance, Chris Hemsworth is going to get cast to play Hulk Hogan in a new biopic, you can have a little fun with that one. It doesn't have to necessarily be clickbaity, but you can have a little fun with that headline. No one's expecting Walter Cronkite level journalism from that story.
Right.
On the other hand, if you are dealing with, something like the Jussie Smollett case that has come this week, and really is a great example of how the media needs to be careful with exactly what we say. When that story broke, I remember I got a lot of flack from my own friends and family, or at least questions about why your story is so timid. Why isn't it like, this is a horrible thing and you seem to be couching it in a lot of language? Why is that? And at the time I was like, well, we need to be, I'm kind of giving like a journalism ethics 101 thing of like, we don't want to, only a court can find someone guilty and it's alleged and everything's according to, and so on and so on. And then, the recent revelations come out and reveal why it's so important to take that approach, because now you have to go back and live by every word you wrote. And did you jump the gun on something? Did you make sure everything that you wrote was attributed to somebody? The police are saying this, he's saying this, can you walk? Is it still true now, even in light of the new information? So, I think we walk that line in the more breaking news sense. I think we tend on the side of, not at all trying to clickbait it and really being careful about our language and writing something that can stand up on its own from here on out. When it comes to the lighter side, I think we have a bit more fun, and it's all just about engaging your audience and knowing the story.
Yeah, and I think to that end, not to brag too much, but I think in general, Canadian journalism as a whole is very good at walking that line and not jumping too far, because we seem to walk this line of trying to not be overly sensationalist. And maybe that's just Canadian culture as a whole. I don't know.
Right.
But,
I think we do. We have our moments, but for the most part, I think we look good. I think being north of the U.S. also helps a little bit because it's like, we look great. We tend to look great in comparison to how, U.S. network news sometimes can come off as over the top. But I'd say overall, I think, and especially in moments of major disasters or terror attacks or just national concern, I think most of our newscasts and our online coverage is very restrained. We're not, to your point, even as like a people, I think we don't appreciate a kind of panicky attitude when these things happen. We want calm, disseminated information. If you think about recent situations like the shooting on the Danforth, which of course I covered more or less in my backyard, and the Yonge Street attacks, and even something like the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, which wasn't obviously a terror situation, but was a national tragedy. I think you see a very restrained coverage, right? No one, as a country, that's what we expect. We want something that's calm and reasonable and level-headed, and I think that's, to our credit, what generally gets presented across all our news when something terrible happens.
We live in this age of fake news, and how is Global News responding to those attacks on media outlets themselves? We talk about these 15-second news clips, and even seeing some media outlets getting tricked, right? Yeah. And that's where it was Jesse Hemsworth, right? So where I think they were obviously intentionally trying to trick news agencies into running this story, and we need to take a moment and actually look at it and.
Right. I mean, look, as an organization, there's only so much we try to do. To present the best content we can. We're taking steps right now to try and educate our audience about how we make decisions, specifically like why we use words like allegedly and according to, and why language often comes off as very couched, for the following legal reasons, and what our process is and what our process is for unnamed sources. I think for a long time, our business has, in an attempt to be guarded about our secrets or we put a veil a bit over our process. A lot of people to the outside, stories come out of a news agency, they don't really know to what level the stories has been vetted, they don't know to what level it's been fact checked, they don't know what the process is. In the past, you could just trust a brand. I think people nowadays want to be let in. They want to, we want to lift the veil on that and tell people what our process is and what needs to meet the standards of X, Y, and Z. And I think organizationally, that's what we're doing. I think also, when people say they don't trust news agencies anymore, this is my own personal theory. Oftentimes people will say they don't trust news, but it's still their first turn to anytime something big happens. So the don't trust is more of, it's an attack on, sensationalism, and it's an attack on the way stories have been presented, and it's an attack perhaps on bias if you don't like the leaning of the news agency, or you feel they don't cover a certain story or person fairly. But it isn't necessarily I'm breaking up with you letter. It isn't necessarily I'm not going to turn to you. It's just changes I would like. Same thing when people say, they say McDonald's isn't, it's so bad and I feel terrible. It's like, yeah, but you're going to eat McDonald's at some point again, right? It's brand suggestions. It's things I'm not necessarily done as a news viewer, but the following things are changes I would like to see. So when people say I don't trust news anymore, I personally feel like we haven't lost them as a viewer or as a, someone who's going to read a story or hear a story on the radio or something. You will still turn to a news organization. If you got a text right now and its contents were crazy, some crazy thing is going on and your friend's like, are you seeing this? What's your first student? Maybe it's Twitter. But even on Twitter, you're looking for those verified accounts. You're not looking for Joe's, whatever, your buddy from college. Like, that's not the person. You're looking for those verified accounts. You're Googling, you're looking it up, and you're looking for you're going to the news section. You want some sort of verification. So there is still a trust factor. I think people still want to trust in a news sense, to trust news organizations and to trust that someone out there is curating the news and the information and presenting it, because no one has time to know and read everything.
No.
And, I think it's just a matter of how we present it, how we don't overstep our boundaries, and just try and do it as honestly as we can and educate our viewers about the processes behind it. Look, at the end of the day, people have been saying news, have their problems with news since news existed, basically.
It's not a new problem.
Peg that, right? Like the 1800s onwards, it often is accused of having a bias. It often is, people have whatever problems they have with it. They have whatever problems with the reporting. It's just something that's never going to go away. And you just have to adapt with it and try and win the most amount of people you can, while not exposing yourself to huge mistakes, biases, obvious overreaches, stuff like that. And I think if you walk that line and you try to go to the viewer and you don't get in the way personally, at least in a digital sense, don't make the story about you. Don't make it about you, the reporter. Make it about what's going on. I think that's the way you win in the digital space.
I think that's the big thing about this digital space now, compared to even when I was growing up. The internet emerging and kind of coming out, but now is that I think sometimes people don't realize something that maybe should be labeled as an opinion piece and isn't, is very different from what an actual news article is. I remember growing up, the first time I saw W5, and any Canadians watching will know W5, but I remember turning to my parents and going, what is W5? Like, what a stupid name for a television show. And then they explained to me what the 5 W's were. I went, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so I still read news with those pillars in mind. And if the story doesn't contain those somewhere in there, I kind of look at it from a different angle, right?
So I can think of who, what,
where, why.
Oh, and why. Okay. That was the fifth one.
So last but not least.
And those are really important things. And I find that today, especially with social media, blogging style journalism, they don't follow that structure. And that always, I think that's really where the fake news comes from, I think.
Well, and Global can leverage these opportunities by kind of entering into this golden age of truth and sincerity and transparency, where if you put out a story and you present it, you're instantly going to have feedback on it from people that are on the ground. There's going to be other angles and other sides to it, where before, we talk about the 1800s and having these bias, and people have hated the news since then, but you could actually have like a directed piece at that time where there would be no dissension, there would be no feedback, and no one would know any better.
Right.
And now you can have that conversation. You can hear from someone that actually experienced it, maybe right even in the chat on that post.
Well, definitely the beauty of social media is the fact that you get that instantaneous public discourse of what's happening and that open discussion. Yeah, sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, and sometimes it's down the middle, but at least it's happening. And that's, I think, an overall positive despite the risk.
Right, yes. I mean, like you said, you open yourself up to some bad feedback. The internet can sometimes not be a nice place. But like you said, it allows for a membrane between audience and content maker that is so incredibly thin that you don't need to wait for, the feedback is instantaneous in the moment. I think that can even be partially addicting, right? We all know now we're all kind of on our phones way more than I think we ever envisioned we would be if someone had described this technology to you growing up, it's not something you think you would be on a lot.
No.
But, I often say that, as we talk about maybe the problems of social media, I really do believe in bringing people together and in bringing down walls and in allowing you to see the world out someone else's eyes. Now, in our personal social media, it's often very positive. There's again, nothing wrong with that. We'd be the same way showing photo albums to people, back in the day. It wouldn't be like, here's the time I went on a bender and put my fist through the wall. Like, you don't do that. It would still be the nice part of your life. That part of it is fine. But just in terms of the difference of, what it's like in this part of the world and what it's like in this part of the world, you don't need to have it described or read about. You can just see it. You can just, someone on the ground in a breaking news situation, whether it's a fire in Istanbul, whether it's a plane crash in Norway, whether it's, you're there, you're on the ground. And I think it really resonates on a global human level. When you see something like that and like the walls between us as culturally and geographically kind of come down in a digital space, which I think is a really powerful form of the medium. And obviously I'm a little biased because it's the form I work in, but you mentioned earlier the crash on Highway 400.
Yeah.
A big mantra that we preach at Global, and we're trying to preach to all our local newsrooms, as much as the internet presents a whole bunch of challenges in terms of presenting the news, a lot of which we've discussed already tonight, challenges in terms of fact checking, challenges in terms of, that ad revenue and that giant market share, which you're competing with so many different voices. The upside is that that story, 30, 40 years ago, is a nightly news story or a radio broadcast, and that's it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you say 70-car pileup, that's an international story. First of all, everyone in Canada sees that and goes, oh, really? Like, you don't even need to really know where Highway 400 is, but you go, oh man, that sounds crazy. It's worth a click. I'll click on that. That sounds pretty crazy. What's going on? I know somebody who lives there. If you have good video and you've done your job with, SEO, and you've done your job with social media, and there's good, supported content, and the reporting is strong, that story is now an international story. Yeah. Phenomenon such as that, for better or worse, natural phenomenon, human interest, something like, car accidents or building collapses, those things that happen all over the world, bring people together. You don't care necessarily when you click on a story where it is. You're not clicking on it because your personal commute is going to be bothered, which is how news would have done that story 3 decades ago. Your commute is bothered. The highway is closed. You listening to your radio, I can't be like, it's a crazy scene as I describe it. I mean, you probably do that because that's what reporters love to do. But it wouldn't connect the same way. The video of that connects, and your Periscope broadcast, like you said, connects. It brings you there in that moment. You are that cop walking down that street, tractor trailers smashed into each other, highway shut down. It's a very dramatic scene, and you're there in that moment in a way that it doesn't really, you could be watching that, on vacation in Mexico and go, oh, that's crazy, and spend, a minute or 2 of your day up there in that story. So I think as much as it brings challenges, we tell people it also brings incredible opportunity. If you present your story the right way, maybe just tweak it a little, maybe just find that digital, optimized element, you can reach an audience as a local reporter that you would never have been able to reach in that same job 30 years ago. Right. You are playing on a huge global playground and in a huge marketplace of news and content that can get you so many more eyeballs and opportunities to grow your personal brand as a reporter, to grow the company's brand as a news agency. There's just no downside to it, and it's really, really exciting for people who embrace it.
That's probably a great place to wrap it up because that's pretty much the icing on the cake, I think, the way you put that.
Totally.
So appreciate you joining us, Elton. It's really great. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Elton.
And of course, we'll look forward to more from Global in the digital space.
All the best, guys. Thank you very much for having me on.
Right, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, that was an interview and a half.
Oh, yeah, that was such a riveting interview. Oh.
All jokes aside, actually, I really enjoyed doing that interview. And when Cameron and I did it, at the end of it, I'm like, wait, that was how long? Because it didn't feel like it at the time. So,
no, that guy was good. He was full of energy, too. And
yeah,
he was a good guest,
it was very good. We did that fairly late at night. It was way past business hours for everyone involved, but it was still... it was
like 7 o'clock. It was almost bedtime.
It was.
Wild. Things get pretty crazy here sometimes live at Epiphan show.
But yeah, it was. I really enjoyed that interview, so I hope you guys did as well. It was really interesting. Elton had a lot of interesting insights, and we kind of, tried to throw some pieces out there and get a taste of what's going on.
Yeah. So thanks to Elton, thanks to Global for
allowing him to come
on, allowing him being permissive, letting him speak. So.
Yeah, so
we don't have a whole lot else. We've got lots of people chit-chatting here in the chat, which is great.
Yeah, I've been answering people's questions here in the background, not actually sleeping. But if you guys have any questions about that interview, please put them into the chat, and we'll address those as best we can. But also just if you have thoughts about the changing world of media, our consumption, especially how it relates to live streaming shows like this.
We are the future, right?
Well, I don't know about that.
No, maybe not. Some other younger people maybe are the future. I got my t-shirt, a daughter a t-shirt that says, I am the future. Really? She wore it on her birthday, yeah.
Did you? Yeah.
You can do that when you're 10 years old.
That's true. You can get away with it when you're 10 years old.
Yeah. It's good for annoying old people, too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, next week. Lisa, am I right? Are we going to be off-site next week? So, we have a very fun show planned for next week.
I did see a little tip about that.
Yeah.
That'll be very exciting. That'll be a bit of a change from this one. This was a little too serious.
We're going to be very serious. We are going to completely swing the pendulum towards a really fun story, which is about Crusoe, the celebrity dachshund.
Yeah, the dog. Yeah.
And Crusoe, this dog, is a superstar. He's been on The Ellen Show. He's been on all the big morning shows in America.
Millions of subscribers.
Yeah, like 100 million people have watched his videos. Like, that's how many watches
crazy.
He has. It's insane.
Crazy.
So
we're going to interview a dog.
We're going to interview a very successful content creator and talk to him about how he's been able to use live video and video to make a very good business.
and be internet famous with a dog.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have to be on camera, really. So we're going to expose.
No, I think it's very interesting, and I know we've been working on setting that one up for a while. Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll be here 3 o'clock next. Well, not here. Yeah. We'll be
offsite somewhere.
Here 3 o'clock
in the cloud somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was great. Again, I hope everyone enjoyed that interview with Elton, and we'd like to thank him once again. And next week we have that great interview with a dog. No,
we do. It's true. He's not lying.
And of course, we do have NAB coming up, and so anyone who maybe didn't win our contest but was still really wanting to go, hopefully you get that opportunity, and we will see you there. Of course, we do have links somewhere to give away passes.
I think. If you need a free pass to NAB,
we'll make sure we try and get
come to our website. It'll be obvious.
There'll be some links and stuff. We'll try and get in there for those, and should be good.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks so much. See you next week.